Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior. And as always, welcome back to yet another God of War video on the channel. With us today, tackling some really big and important news regarding the future of the series. Because outside of the possible Egyptian sequel, our first somewhat real shot of the live action adaptation of God of War, as well as the finer details surrounding the cancelled Bluepoint God of War live service game. I swear I'll touch on all of these very soon. Bear in mind, all this information just kind of flooded my feed over the last week. Over the course of the last day or so, we've actually got some pretty big news regarding the state of God of War in the supposed secretive spin-off that has been led by Cory Barlog, an apparent Faye-led prequel to the Norse saga and series of games. In a way, bridging the gap between 3 and 4, while simultaneously giving us a better look and understanding of the 9 realms just before Kratos' arrival. So kind of like the God of War trilogy remake, it creates and paints a very interesting sort of prequel scenario that in turn could help complement the 2018 game and Ragnarok. Now, bear in mind, this has largely been news, leaks, and speculation, so nothing is quite 100% locked in stone, as it hasn't come from Santa Monica directly nor PlayStation, but considering how this news has been coming out from multiple different sources here, and has actually been kind of foreshadowed in interviews, dating all the way back to that of 2018, and actually for a really long time following Ragnarok's release. It was a fan-theorized belief that this would be the DLC and expansion. That is, of course, until Santa Monica Studios threw a curveball our way, saying that there wouldn't be a DLC story, and then later followed up with Valhalla. So I guess we were kind of right in some capacity, just not the DLC department. So before we get to my own personal thoughts and opinions on all of this, let's actually talk about the details that have actually come out here, break them down point by point to analyze them, and what do we know of this project currently. So our first point here is that Faye will be the main protagonist of this game. And I will say, when you really think about it, it does actually kind of make sense. The 2018 game in itself had an extremely strong focus on Kratos, with him as the center focus of the narrative. And it wasn't just to reintroduce him to a newer audience, but to ultimately reinvent him from the ground up, to show how his scars from the past never truly healed, despite how hard he tried to push forward, even resenting the part of him that was a god, until he chose to embrace it alongside his son, showing that they must be better. And Ragnarok itself, whilst the larger action set pieces are spearheaded by Kratos, a large majority of Ragnarok's story does center and revolve around Atreus, having him deduce and understand the true nature behind Loki, and his significance to the prophecy of Ragnarok, showing that you could change, bend, and alter fate. So a third installment that is a prequel, with Faye as the main focus, makes a lot of sense, as each installment here has focused on a different member in the family. I think it works and kind of makes sense with how the formula's been established here. And even after Faye's death, remnants and echoes of her character really do live on throughout the world, from the Leviathan axe itself, to Atreus' bow, to her hand marks scattered and etched throughout the lands, marking the journey that she wanted her husband and son to go on. And even then, during the events of Ragnarok, we learn so much more about her character. How she stood shoulder to shoulder with Durlin, fighting on behalf of the dwarves in a failed revolution against the Aesir, played a hand alongside Tyr in saving the giants of Midgard during Thor's mindless slaughter of them, and then battling the Odin son himself during a confrontation in Vanaheim. So in terms of story and narrative, there's plenty to pull from here, especially as a spin-off installment. There are stories there to be told and expanded upon. And that's not even us touching on her first confrontation with Kratos here, where they nearly wound up killing each other. Thus, in my mind, it always in some capacity made sense that we were always going to see this character return in some way, shape, and form. She's far too important to both Kratos and Atreus to be ignored, but is also incredibly pivotal to this entire world and series. And to further back up this idea, Cory Barlog, the director of the 2018 game, has gone down on record in multiple interviews since that game's release that he always had an idea for a prequel. it was always in his scope and vision to have something that could prelude and expand on the world he helped create. It allows them to flesh out that universe much more and make it far more rich than what was established. Something that I will say was largely my criticism of Ragnarok, because the 2018 game does such a fantastic job of establishing that world, introducing us to its realms, characters, and gods, but we don't really see or encounter all of them during either 2018 or Ragnarok. So a third prequel installment could serve as an answer to many of those questions here. Plus, to kind of point out the elephant in the room, the casting of Deborah Ann Woll anyway was always a signal right out the gate that there was going to be more to this character. She's quite an established actress, hence why we believed for the longest time that this would lead up into a DLC expansion. The writing was kind of on the wall and it simply made sense. And I guess in many ways still does if it is indeed a spin-off game. Now, our next point here is that the gameplay is described to be different to that of the other Norse games, said to have been influenced by Devil May Cry, with a heavy emphasis on action as well as speed. And I will say this does really intrigue me for a lot of reasons here, because the formula from the reboot to that of Ragnarok was incredibly similar. I mean, naturally so, as you're playing as Kratos. You're simply expanding on a previously established toolkit. But with Faye, she's basically a blank canvas here. We have absolutely no idea what their approach could be with her. Whilst we've never seen Faye fight, we absolutely know that she can go toe to toe with the best of them, having fought both Kratos and Thor to a stalemate, which ties into how unique her toolkit could be here. Because if it's influenced in any capacity by Devil May Cry style switching, we could have an incredibly unique approach to gameplay that largely differs from what's established. Something that's changed and modified depending on player preference, adding different layers of difficulty as well as creativity and expression. Because as far as we know, she will have the Leviathan axe and Atreus' bow. The style switch can add a new sense of flavor and approach with how those weapons perform in Faye's hands. Like even in Ragnarok, when you're playing as either of the characters, Kratos feels heavy, he feels built like a tank, and he hits just as hard. Whereas Atreus is a bit more nimble, gaining more of an advantage at range, but not being terrified himself to throw hands. He's just not as skilled as his father in that department, but it doesn't make him any less dangerous, which is what excites me about Faye, because we've been told that she's been described as faster. Plus, I cannot lie, if they even get a finisher that is a modicum close to that of Judgment Cut End, then far as I'm concerned, they've done this perfectly. But even if I am getting a bit ahead of myself here, I do want to see how those abilities do translate into larger scale boss fights. Because if we are battling Thor, I want to see how she can hang and how she can go toe to toe with him. How does she stack up in comparison to that of Kratos? And even then, it would be fitting to actually have Kratos be the last boss, to set up their first confrontation before their romance did eventually blossom. And the idea of this alone really kind of excites me, and I think this is really cool. Because speaking for myself here, have you ever really thought how terrifying it is to be on the opposing side against Kratos? Because we've kind of seen that a little bit. Calling back to that of God of War 3, we did get a POV perspective of how Poseidon saw Kratos, but we've never really had an opportunity to go up against the Ghost of Sparta and experience how he would canonically fight in combat. That to me is super interesting to see. It's very ambitious on my part, I know, but this plays with a lot of really cool ideas that I'd love to see be expanded upon. And talking a little bit back on the story stuff, since we're talking about Kratos, I think a really nice way of wrapping up this story would be to see how she both carved and hid those murals of the future. The somewhat finale to those games that adds both finality and is somewhat full circle moments, which ties into both the 2018 reboot as well as that of Ragnarok. I think that would mark a good conclusive end to this all. A very nice finale and send off for the Norse saga. And our last and final point here, we are supposed to get a preview earlier this year, most likely during the Summer Games Festival, before its intended release being that of next year, with no date currently given. So again, it's kind of up in the air with what's going on with this project, but this is all that we do currently know. And I will say, after years of silence, this does sound really cool. I'm really looking forward to this, as I love the Norse series of games, flaws and all. But admittedly, I am quite worried in a lot of departments, and for very good reason. Because these are like super ambitious shoes for a character to fill. Whilst I have like zero to no doubt that Deborah Ann will absolutely kill it in the role, Kratos has always kind of been like the heart center and focus of the series. So to pull away from him, there is going to be a bit of whiplash there. But it does get the benefit of the doubt, with us knowing full well that these two are destined to meet each other. There's always going to be some conflict, but I'm also okay with this happening, since it is being written as a spin-off. If this game can come out and not directly interfere or take away on whatever they're working on next, then by all means, please go ahead. And I know that whilst some may be a bit weary about this, especially with some of the writing decisions for certain characters in Ragnarok, bear in mind that this is under the creative vision of Cory Barlog. He's the one spearheading this. So whatever creative vision he has is tonally gonna line up with the 2018 game more. So in that department, I'm completely fine with that. It's just my biggest gripes here is that, well, it's a prequel. Whilst I do not hate prequels by any intents and purposes, when a narrative is set in the past, there are certain expectations and fates for characters that are already predetermined. So particular fights and battles may lose a little bit of weight, knowing of certain characters' ends. It's why I talked about the other gods a little bit earlier on, because this is actually a really rare opportunity here, for their fates are unwritten. That opens up the window of introducing new characters that aren't shackled or bound to somewhat spoilers. It puts a really big question mark over their head on just how expendable they are. What can they add to the narrative that's different here? And in terms of presentation, I will say that I'm super intrigued being able to see what the Nine Realms looked like in their prime, to actually meet and spend time with the real Tyr and see how everything kind of led up to where it did, adding emphasis to the devastation that was soon to come. Those are the benefits of a prequel. It's a bit of a double-edged sword in that regard, but as a whole, I will say this is something I'm really excited to see. Again, we theorized this in post-Ragnarok, only to be told that we were wrong, and then get a possible full game out of it. In that instance, that's super cool. I just want to see how it all wraps up its narrative and ties into each installment here. That is my biggest takeaway. And if it can land correctly, then it makes these two other games that much better. It's just like I said, there's a very ambitious shoes to fill, so the stakes are incredibly high. But with them having an emphasis and focus on action here, it could really help show us why a character this elusive became this important to the overarching narrative. Those are things I'm really excited to see. So with that said and everything covered here, I now relay the question onto you of, what are your thoughts on this spin-off here? Are you excited about this premise? Are you looking forward to seeing more of the Norse saga and series? Or do you wish the series to move forward to somewhere like, let's say, Egypt? Please do comment down below, as I'd love to hear what you have to say. I know that everyone's thoughts and feelings on this are going to be different across the board, but I will say right now, keep your reservations in place until we see something official. Currently right now, I think what's here could be something really good and really special, but it has to absolutely be done right, and it needs to be done well here to stick the landing. Plus, I do not want a spin-off game like this to take away development time from another mainline installment. That is arguably one of my own biggest worries here, but that's my current thoughts and feelings. So, until the next one everyone, that has been it for me. Please keep an eye out for the History of Faye video this weekend. Of course, I absolutely had to make one, but until the next one everyone, that's been it for me. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.